Great leaders are not found, they are built. One conversation, one challenge, and one opportunity at a time. Welcome to the Voice of Impact, where belief meets action. Our podcast amplifies stories, systems, and solutions behind meaningful change. I'm your host, Robert Ndoping. Today's conversation brings us into the heart of leadership, not at the executive level alone, but at the ground level where businesses are built, people are developed, and cultures are shaped. Because the future of an organization is not determined by the talent you hire, but the leaders you choose to grow. My guest today is Rich Ashton, a seasoned entrepreneur, business leader, and author who has spent over 4 decades building, transforming, and leading businesses across multiple industries. Rich began his career with the Tramwell Crow Company, where he developed a foundation rooted in ethical leadership, people empowerment, and the importance of workplace culture, principles that would guide his entire journey as a leader. After becoming a partner, he transitioned into the world of small business, where he went on to buy, sell, operate, and turn around multiple companies, including a nearly bankrupt HVAC business that is successfully rebuilt and continues to own till today. Throughout his journey, Rich noticed a consistent challenge. As small businesses grew, they often struggle to find their next layer of leadership. Determined to solve this, he developed a leadership training program within his own company, a program so effective that allowed him to step away from daily operations and entrust his business to the very leaders that he developed. He's the author of Growing Your Own Common Sense Advice for Developing Leaders Within a Small Business, where he shapes practical real world strategies to help organizations cultivate leadership from within. At the core, Rich believes that leadership is not something you wait for, it's something you build. Rich, welcome to the Voice of Impact today.
Thanks, Robert. I especially like that last sentence you said that you don't wait for leaders to develop. You're proactive about it. I hadn't heard exactly that. I really like the way you put that.
You're welcome. I'm happy I captured it well enough that really reflects your rich background.
Well,
So, Rich,
I think when you say I was seasoned, I think that just means I'm old. I've done it for a long time, and I definitely have.
I'll call it a mix of both.
Yeah.
Okay, Rich. So, before we talk about small businesses, before we talk about you developing leaders across companies, let's start with you. What early experiences shaped your beliefs about leadership, about people, about building strong organizations, about taking risk, which I know you took a lot of in your early days?
I did, and I think that's a great place to start. I'm the product of a very smart father, a very driven father, and so I came into the business world modeling like you do, modeling his behavior. The problem is my dad was a very authoritarian leader, and so I carried that into the first part of my career. And although I had some success, I hit a wall around the age of 40. It was reflected in having some difficulty with my businesses and in addition to just my personal life. And so that was the point that I learned the what worked for the rest of my time and still works for me today. And that is that it all starts with relationships with people. And I think that's the thing that I like about small business the most is that you can really connect with the people you work with. There's not an HR department that says, hey, you're getting a little too close to that person, or you don't need to know about their family or whatever. I find that as an influencer, which is what a leader is, that if I understand the people that I'm trying to lead, I'm just so much more effective. And similarly, if I'm transparent and if they know who's leading them and they know that I'm not just all talk, that I walk the ethical walk that I'm talking about, and I'm seriously interested in them, not as an employee, but them as a person, then I have found that if I keep that as the foundation of my leadership style, that I kind of reignited my career in my mid 40s and it's worked since then. Not only does it work, but it just makes business life so much more enjoyable.
Ah, that's deep. That's deep. I want to go a little bit deeper about the challenges that shaped your leadership philosophy. I mean, what are some of those challenges for somebody listening that might want to understand that really shaped your philosophy as a leader?
So I am very, very fortunate to be surrounded by lots of mentors. I always have. I guess I ask enough questions. But interestingly, my wife, who has no interest in business at all, has is fantastic at building relationships. And I didn't pay attention to that for the first 20 years of our marriage, or first 10, excuse me, 10 years of our marriage. But when I hit that snag in around 40, I began to pay attention to how she built relationships and then simultaneously how others built those relationships. And I would see other entrepreneurs face similar challenges to the ones that I was really struggling with. And I watched how they handled it. And I learned both from my wife and from the others that I was not really connecting with people. I was friendly. I knew a lot of people, but I didn't know enough about them or or seemingly care enough about them to really move the needle with them. And once I learned that relationships are to be cherished and that you almost can't have enough of them, I started getting results from my relationships that I hadn't gotten before.
Wow, results from relationships and how you build relationship. That's a lesson there. Uh, let's go a little bit on some of the things you've done in your work. I mean, in your work, you've
Okay.
identified, the critical challenge. As small businesses grow, they struggle to find the next layer of leadership. Can you explain a little bit about the gap that exists and how small businesses can bridge that gap?
Yeah, what I found, and I really found it in not only every business that I owned, but every business that my friends owned, is that you reach a point, and let's say you have 5 employees, and you reach a point where growth is happening, but my gosh, you're doing 15, 18 things a day. Your employees are working hard, and it's such a fun existence, but it's a taxing existence. And one day you say, I've got to have some more help doing this. And I've got to offload some of the things that I don't do well. For instance, most entrepreneurs are pretty good on vision. They're good on marketing. They're good on product development, but they may not be good on operations. And so it's very helpful to be able to offload your operational responsibilities to someone who's skilled in operations. But probably within your 5-person organization, there's no one skilled enough in operations to lead as an operations manager. So you look outside and you decide, well, gosh, this person has gotten some training, and I know it was in a different kind of organization. It was in a much bigger organization, but I think he'll really enjoy the challenges we have in small business. Well, that doesn't work out. A lot of the times, small business that's so exciting to those of us who are in it is very frustrating to those who are not in it. And the idea of doing all those different things in a day, that doesn't appeal to everybody. It appeals to an entrepreneur, but it doesn't appeal to everybody. And so I failed by bringing in leaders who were capable of doing the job I hired them to do, but all they really wanted to do was say, here's how we did it in the big company. And it doesn't, it seldom works in a small company. On the other side of that, the employees who have fought all these battles right alongside you go, wow, when we've given him everything. When it came time for a promotion, how about us? How did he look past us? And really, we don't particularly like this guy that was brought in, and we don't think he shares our core values. And so it's a difficult situation. And I failed by promoting people who weren't ready. I failed by bringing in people from outside. Ultimately, I decided that if I was ever going to walk away from the company happily, not selling it to somebody who didn't share our values, but watching the company thrive and continue without my leadership, I was going to have to develop those leaders from within our company. Now, most recently, I have run blue collar companies and terrific people, very skilled at what they did. Maybe they're technical, maybe they installed things, but they rarely had any leadership exposure, any leadership training. So I started a program. I started trying to make them think like me, an entrepreneurial owner. That frankly did not work, and I abandoned the first try. But after thinking about how this should go and the people that I was dealing with, I started by asking the leadership team, so what is it that's holding you back? Why have you not progressed in leadership? Do you not have an interest? Do you want to do it, but you don't know where to start? And once we identified those ceilings of each of the 8 people in the leadership program, we then were able to specifically train to get them past those ceilings. Maybe the ceilings were emotional. Maybe they were simply that they had not been exposed to leadership in their family, never thought they'd wind up as a leader, so never really paid any attention to the difference between people who were leading and people who were being led. Um, that worked, and it's fascinating to deal with those ceilings, to identify with them, and then find out how to break through those ceilings. And we had a lot of success doing it. That was a long answer to your question. I hope I covered some ground you wanted covered.
Yeah, you did. You did. I mean, what is interesting is you mentioned that, you try to take people with technical skills to think like you. And at some point that didn't really, it didn't work the way you wanted it to work. I mean, why does technical skill not always translate to leadership? Is there an advice for someone who is within that technical space, but who wants to translate, especially their technical team, to leaders?
Yeah, a couple of things. And what I really had meant to convey with that comment is that I wanted them to become entrepreneurs because I was an entrepreneur. There's no way they were going to become entrepreneurs. They were able to become leaders. They simply had not ever thought of themselves as leaders, did not know where to start. And frankly, if you go online and say, I'm in small business and I'm looking for some leadership information, it's a barren wasteland out there. Leadership books are written for large organizations. And the idea that I was going to give a 400-page academic treatise on leadership to my team and expect them to learn anything from it was silly. Um, People in that situation learn differently. Frankly, I learned much more like they learned, but I was in pursuit of knowledge. I was taught very early in my business career that I needed to pursue knowledge all of the time. And I was 24 years old when I was given that advice. I was told to read the Wall Street Journal every day and to read 5 business periodicals every week. I was shocked at how much about business I learned, and fortunately, I paid enough attention that it's something I still do 52 years later. Um, and now I read on a lot of subjects beyond business, but the pursuit of intellectual curiosity is not common to tradespeople. They will learn in their specific industry. They will learn how to be a better technician. They will learn technical items, but they're not going to go out and read um, leadership information. They're not going to listen to podcasts from entrepreneurs because they just don't relate to it. So I'll tell you in a minute how we kind of bridge that gap. But again, that was kind of a long answer, so I want to make sure I stay on track with what you want to talk about.
Yeah, no, but that's a beautiful one. And I still like to touch a little bit on it. What really happens to an organization when leadership, intentionally moves towards developing that gap to bridge, technical skills to leaders?
Well, if you think of an employee in a small business who just does their job and does a very good job, but nobody ever comes up and says, not what do you want to become, but I think you can become something different. Would you like to try? I can't think of a more empowering approach to building an organization. And so when every employee in the organization knows that it may not happen today, and I may not be ready this year, but I'm free to bring up my aspirations, and I'm working for a company who will pour resources into me when the time is right. And they may be very honest and say, here's what I'd like you to do over the next year to get ready to receive that kind of training. It's not that you can't do it, it's that you're not yet ready to take that step. Well, regardless of your position in the company, if that's available to you, I mean, why would you ever leave that company? And so I think it just makes the company so much more powerful.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful answer there, Rich. Um, let's talk about growing your own leaders. You created a leadership development program within your own company that allowed you to step away from daily operations. So, number one, what inspired you? And talk a little bit about this program and how now you have put out this program for other small businesses to learn and follow that example that you did.
Sure, it's currently my favorite subject to talk about. When I began the leadership program, I said I went to the internet and looked to supplement my leadership knowledge that I had gained over the years and didn't find the support that I wanted. So I kind of just started jotting down the things that resonated with me, not the big leadership skills, not the big organization stuff, but examples of what really worked in my life and what other people had done that really connected with me and moved me forward. Um, the program began like all training programs did. We made some progress, but there was no magic. And so I decided to write a blog to the leadership team every 2 weeks about just random leadership and management issues. And it was always something that we were facing currently. And my goal was I wanted them to begin talking about leadership principles among the group. And it didn't work. The general manager said, I'll tell you what, let's in the management meetings, let's force them to talk about the blogs. And when they did that, the program really took off. And because not only did they have to read the blogs and have to apply them to what they were going through, but they began holding each other accountable and saying, hey, the problem that you're facing right now, didn't Rich write something about that 3 weeks ago? Let's take a look at his blog and let's see what he recommended that we do. And so the blogs became a desktop reference for them. They actually started printing them out and they were in white binders on the leaders' desks. And they would pull it out and say, yeah, there's one that he wrote about procrastination a couple of weeks ago. And I reread that and now I get it. I'm guilty of procrastination. And the blogs are simple. They're in the they became the book, and they're about 2.5 pages long in each chapter. They're always backed up by an example from either my life or the life of somebody that I knew, and so they're easily digestible. And I said earlier that tradespeople don't learn by reading big books. They learn by experiencing things. And when you give them an example of something to illustrate your point, and it's an easily understood example, they move forward very quickly. And so I did this. I wrote the blogs for 2 years. At the end of 2 years, I had 52 blogs, and I was about, frankly, out of information to share. I started repeating myself. One weekend, I read through the blogs and I said, if only for a legacy project, this is good enough to put in book form. And so I consolidated the blogs into 35 principles of small business leadership and produced the book that I call Growing Your Own. And it is really kind of as it was written. It's a desktop reference. I've heard people say it's not a book you should sit down and read cover to cover. Then I've heard other people say it was such a short read. I went through it in 2 hours on the airplane. Um, it doesn't matter to me how you consume the information, but for my people, they keep the book handy and they pull it out and say, wow, I went back and reread chapter 16 today, and it really helped me solve a problem that I was having. So that's how growing your own came about, and that's how it's useful.
Ah, that's a beautiful story. And I would love to hear from you. I mean, what transformations did you see? I mean, once people were giving that opportunity, one, to read the book, two, to reference that book, and using it as a tool to lead. I mean, for the while that you have been sharing this book, not just within your company, but with other small businesses that have, got an opportunity to, have a hold of this book.
Some of the comments that I have gotten, I think my favorite is that it's reading each chapter is like having a mentor in the room who wants you to succeed. And I love that that was said. But the other day, I presented the book to a group in Atlanta, and one of the guys who's an accomplished CEO in his mid 40s uh, got back to me afterwards, and he said, "I read the book on the airplane ride home." And he said, I don't know that I learned anything new, but I was reminded of 5 or 6 things that I used to do that I don't do any longer. And he said, I guarantee you I'm going to start doing them again. And he said, I was blown away by, as simple as the book is, by how much of it resonated with me. And then my youngest son, as he was reading the book, called me about halfway through and said, Dad, this is about life. This isn't just about business. So I have gotten comments similar to those, but you asked for an example. My very favorite, and I have a lot of them, my very favorite is a guy who came to work for us 19 years ago, and his goal was to work for 6 months to earn enough money to travel back to Mexico. He was at the bottom rung on our food chain in the company, and I liked him immediately. He was a good guy, but and I could tell that he was reasonably smart. Well, he didn't go back to Mexico at that time. He stayed with us, and over the years, he grew to a point where we said, "We think you can be part of this leadership team. Do you have an interest?" And he said, I don't think of myself as a leader, but I'd sure like to learn more." He now, after 19 years, and somebody who had never been exposed to leadership, had never been treated to leadership education, through this program, he has become one of the strongest voices on our leadership team. He runs our supply chain operation. He has learned so much, and he's hungry for so much more. He's become a way better father, according to him. He's Hispanic, and in the Hispanic culture, the expanded family or extended family usually has one person, regardless of age, who becomes the leader of the family. That's him. He's not the oldest, but he's definitely the leader. And it's so exciting to watch that skill be unlocked in people who just from the outside you'd look at and go, there's no leadership in that human being. But there sure was in Nefty's case.
That's really heartwarming. I think for me personally, mentoring someone, who maybe did not see themselves as a leader, who maybe just felt, I'm another worker in the company. I just want to make enough money and accomplish a few things in life. I'm building them up into a leader. I think they will be forever grateful. And I mean, for you, I think that's a legacy that you talked about at some point in the beginning that you said, okay, if you write this book just as a legacy, I mean, that would satisfy, it will meet the goal And I think this exceeds the goal because, yes, in the beginning, maybe you thought, yes, you're going to create a legacy for your leaders, but now it's exceeding that goal, which I think is so much credit to you and what you've been able to build by not just creating a book, but also mentoring. I mean, a young man now who now stands tall, not just within your company, but also within his community and his family. I mean, that's kudos to you. That story is really heartwarming to me as a person.
Well, it's fun for me to get to tell it. There are other stories that go along that probably didn't take 19 years, but the response has been great. I have enough entrepreneur in me that it went from being a legacy project into something that I hope to share with a much wider audience. The response from people who have read the book and taken the course has been very heartwarming, and I'm encouraged. So it's fun for me to share this. It obviously is a passion of mine, and I would love to solve this dilemma in small businesses all around the country, around the world, by getting this message out and getting the book in the hand and the training course in the hands of people who can use it.
Oh yes, I'm really hoping there's somebody listening to this podcast right now who normally would find, this valuable information as something they want to get hold of. Get hold of the book, get a hold of the course, and get an opportunity to touch base with Rich. Rich, there's something I also want us to touch about. I mean, your work and what you've built over the years emphasizes the importance of culture, empowerment. We talked about some of that earlier. I mean, how would you say leadership and culture work together to create what we call sustainable success?
Well, it all starts with establishing that culture, and the culture is established around shared values. And I'm having read Simon Sinek's book, Start with Why. That was a great book for me to read to just really focus on what it is our company was about. Why are we in business? Why do we do what we do? And let's don't ever get away from those principles. So that's the first part, and that's one of the reasons our culture has remained so strong all these years, is we've never varied from our core principles of doing business ethically, providing exceptional customer service, and treating people with respect, both customers and employees. Um, but there are other pieces of leadership that you have to build in. The first one would be accountability. I was very influ I always have, I was raised in an accountable family. I've always held myself to a high standard. But when I read the book Extreme Ownership by Leif Babin and Jocko Willink, I understood accountability on an entirely different level. There's came out of the military, and in the military, you're not worried about profit and loss. You're worried about loss of life. And so the idea of the leader being ultimately accountable for everything that happens underneath him is a very powerful concept. So we talk a lot about that. We talk about proactivity. Leaders who sit back and wait for things to happen aren't leaders very long, and they're not very effective. Leadership at every level requires a can do, I've got to get this done, no procrastination, let's get after it. They're also at the foundation of every organization is communication. And, if you ask 100 business owners or people in business, what's the most screwed up thing in your organization? Virtually every one of them will say communication. And communication is not as difficult as people make it. I'll use a delegation example. If I delegate something to an employee, I first need to I need to understand that they heard what I said, that we both are operating on the same page. The second part of that delegation is for me to assure them that if you reach a stumbling block, ask me. I'm not going to give you the answer, but I'll point you in the right direction. I want to help you along the way. And we're going to agree on a timeline. We're going to agree that the project that you're working on is going to be completed by such and such a date. And then I'm going to check in with you along the way and say, how are you coming? I'm not micromanaging. I just want to know if there's if there's anything that's a problem. And then when the date comes, we're going to talk about either the project was either completed successfully on time It was not completed, or it was completed, but it's not successful. We're going to talk about that. We're going to use that as a building block for our next communication. That circle of communication is so often left incomplete. And you hear people who say, well, delegation doesn't work. I told them what to do. They just didn't do it. Well, they didn't do it because they didn't understand what you communicated with them, and you never checked back with them to see how they were coming. And so when the final date came, they may have made zero progress, and it's as much your fault as it is theirs. I have had people refuse to do things over the years. Those people are very few and far between. I've had far more say, I didn't understand what you wanted from me. And so, that style of communication where you complete the circle from start to finish is really, really important. Another is the difference between emotional leadership and unemotional leadership. I obviously, there's some emotion in my approach, but there's never any emotion in my analysis of a situation. I always want to consider what the emotional impact of my decisions is going to be, but I never make decisions based on emotion or starting from a position of emotion. I think you have to be a critical thinker to be an effective leader. And then the last thing, which involves um, creativity and all, is what I mentioned earlier, the pursuit of knowledge. If you are not actively pursuing intellectual curiosity on a variety of fronts every single day, you can never become the kind of leader that you need to become. And the reason is very simple. Number one, you need to know a lot of things beyond business to be a really effective leader. And then secondly, the more you know about how people think, why they do what they do, the more able you are to influence them. So those are kind of the foundational pillars of the leadership that I teach.
That's beautiful. I think for me, the biggest take from what you said was, you have a lot of emotions in your leadership, but you're mindful of those emotions in your analysis, which means your emotions do not affect your analysis. For me, I interpret the emotions in your leadership as the passion that you have for what you're doing, but you don't let that emotion affect your analysis. I think there's somebody listening that must have picked that because that's a really powerful lesson in terms of emotional leadership.
Well, people have asked me many times, as close as you are to your employees and as much as you know about them, how do you keep it a business relationship? And I really have not struggled with that ever. They know there's a line not to be crossed, and when it does get crossed, I tell them it's been crossed and that we're not going there, that it doesn't affect how I feel about them as a person, but there is an employee boss relationship that's not going to be violated. And one of the things that allows me to do is to deliver bad news without it being offensive news. And so if someone is passed over for promotion, they're going to get angry. Maybe somebody else is going to get angry that was passed over. But if you can say to them, here's why the decision was made, here's where you fell short, how can we help you pick up that gap so that the next time a promotion is available, that you're the one at the top of the list? Well, if we're willing to deal with people honestly and transparently like that, um, how would they not be motivated? They still aren't going to like that they got passed over, but at least they understand why and they understand our thinking.
I agree with you 100%. And that's so beautiful. So, Rich, you reached a point in your life where you had to step back and let, the leaders that you develop run your business.
Mhm.
What did that moment mean to you?
Well, it wasn't a moment. It was a process. And so what I did was when I told you that I got at the end of 2 years, I reached a point where I wasn't going to write the blogs anymore. But part of the reason was that they were getting ready. So the next year after that, I stayed in the building, but I turned over the responsibilities of running the company to that team, and it was headed up by a very strong general manager who was always part of the training as well. And They did well. There were times when they needed to come and check with me and all, but by the end of that year, which was last year, they really didn't need me anymore. And it was going to be unfair to the general manager if I stayed in the building. So I sat down with each of them and I told them what I was going to do, that I was going to move to a different office outside the building. I would be back every quarter for a financial review because I still own the companies. And I meet with the general manager, who is now the president. I meet with him every Monday morning for about 45 minutes to an hour off site. And I've been very respectful of his need to lead the company without me in the building. So I don't go in the building. I miss the employees, but I'll see them quarterly, but that's about it. And a few of them have reached out and want to meet me for breakfast or something like that, and that's fine. But I let the president know that I've done that. I don't None of that is going to circumvent his leadership. And so far, it's working out really well. I did reach a point last year where I woke up one morning and I told my wife, if I didn't need to go in today, I wouldn't go in. And she said, in 44 years of being married to you, I've never heard you say that. And I said, yeah, I think it's time. So I had reached the point, at 76 years old, I've done this stuff for a long time and it just wasn't as exciting. Plus, I delegated so much to the team that I really didn't have that much daily responsibility anymore. So at that point, I began getting ready for the next chapter of my life, which I'm in now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of years of experience. And let's say there's someone listening now who needs advice, having a business and is, thinking of succession planning. What would be your best advice for that person?
Well, you can't start too soon. It took me from start to finish on this leadership deal. It took me 8 years, and that was starting and stopping and trying to figure out what to do. Fortunately, I was working through a general manager for most of that time, so I had time to design the program. Most small business owners don't have that time. So you have to look for something to bridge the gap. That's the intention of my book and the leadership course. So I would say, um, look for information which resonates with you. I don't know that you're going to want to train your own team, but somebody like me can help you. And a book like Growing Your Own can bridge the gap so that people can refer to those principles. A 2-day leadership course is still only a 2-day leadership course. It's not being there every day. But the leave behind materials, in my case, the book, that's what bridges the gap. So I don't mean to just hype the book, but I'm unaware that anybody else has taken the same direction that I have for small business, and that has something that's so practical for small business people to rely on.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's so beautiful. And now I just want to talk about a lesson, right? 40 plus years. What has been, I mean, I know there are lots of lessons that you've gathered, but if you were to pick one or two important lessons that you want somebody to hear that you've learned in leadership for this 40 years, what would that be?
Well, I'm trying to think as I go through in my mind which ones I want to highlight. I have talked about each one of them, but the connection with people at more than a superficial level is just, I think it's the most powerful change that I made along the way. And I'm not talking about knowing the names of kids. I'm talking about knowing what makes that individual tick. Everybody's excited about their kids, but I'd like to know what activities is your child in, so we can talk about football or we can talk about music that your child is involved in. I reach out to spouses because they're in this stuff too. They don't work for us, but they put up with the long hours that their husband or wife puts in. And so periodically, I'll reach out through a note to a spouse and just say, your husband or wife is doing such a phenomenal job, and we know that you're sacrificing to make that possible. We just appreciate that. Or I've been to more funerals for people that I didn't know because they were relatives of our employees. But it's so meaningful. I mean, of course I can show up at a funeral. It doesn't matter that I didn't know their father. It means a lot to the employee or visit them in the hospital. All of those things are important. So I would say learn to connect on a level other than just their name, work anniversary, and birthday. The other is that the further you go up in an organization, the more accountability you have. I think there's a tendency to think once I become a boss, I'm less accountable. Wrong. Once you become a leader, you're more accountable. You have more people that you are accountable for, and more things happening beneath you that you are accountable for. I think that's a surprise to a lot of young leaders. And so those would be the two that I would pull out.
Thank you. Those are very solid lessons. Now I just want to invite you, Rich, to share a message or leave a message for, a small business owner right now. Someone that's listening to this podcast or someone that's even just starting to develop their own leadership within their organization. What will be your message for that person?
You will be surprised that those people who are working their tails off for you, you'll be surprised. Not everyone is ready for leadership. But there's some in there who have amazing potential to become more than what they're doing right now. And I think it's one of your responsibilities as a leader to open up that potential and help them to develop into something that they never dreamed that they could be. It's not only good for the organization, it's good for you. And obviously, it's good for them.
That's a good one too, Rich. So we have a tradition at the Voice of Impact, and there are lots of, there we have some themes here. I know sometimes the camera might show it upside down, but I'll just read it out just so that you can choose two out of the six themes that we created specifically for the Voice of Impact podcast show. One will be to speak to your own journey, the other will be for a listener. So the themes are make a difference, rebuild, overcome, stronger, peace, and patience. I'll read it again. Make a difference, rebuild, overcome, stronger, peace, and patience. So I invite you to pick two out of the six, one to speak to your own journey, and then one for somebody listening to us.
I love having the opportunity to talk about peace because peace came on me as a surprise later in my life, about 3 years ago. As an entrepreneur, I don't think you ever think in terms of having peace in your life. I certainly never did in my life. But I was out for a walk one day, and I don't know why it hit me, but I just said, "My gosh, I'm at total peace in my life. My family is good. My finances are good. My faith is good. My business is good." And I was shocked to be able to describe myself as at peace. So I'm happy to tell people that's available. Now, I think you have to combine all of the things I mentioned. For me, faith was a big piece of it. And I don't think I ever could have gotten there if I hadn't reconnected with my faith later in life. And then I guess for the others or for the organization would be make a difference. I do think entrepreneurs see the world differently, and I think we're naturally wired to make a difference, to do things differently, to not view the status quo as something that's ideal. I think we always want to break through the status quo and make a difference. I think that's what makes being an entrepreneur and a small business person fun. I think you can make a difference not only in the lives of your customers and in your own life, but as we've talked about for the last hour or so, you can make a difference in your employees too. And that's the one that pays the long-term dividends.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, Rich, how can someone connect with you? How can someone get hold of your book? How could they reach out if they just really want to learn, pick your brain, or really, get deep into what you've developed as a course or as a book or what you've been doing, and or even how you step back? Any advice? Yeah, how can
The
they
the,
reach
the
out?
website is growingyourown.net, not .com, but .net. And then I love to interact with people directly. If you want to just reach out and email me, I'd be happy to communicate with you. Rich, R-I-C-H, at growingyourown.net. And then I'm not terribly active on social media, but I do post regularly on LinkedIn, so I'm available to be followed and connected with there. And I love hearing from people that with questions and comments and whether or not they've read the book.
Rich, thank you for reminding us that leadership is not about titles, it's about transformation. And today's conversation reminded us that the strongest organizations are not built just on systems alone. They are built on people who are developed, who are trusted, and who are empowered to lead. And to the person listening right now, your team has potential. Your business has an opportunity. And the leaders you're looking for may already be right in front of you. I mean, I've always believed that when you invest in people, you don't just grow a business, you build a legacy that can lead without you. And that's exactly how Rich has explained his work, his legacy, and everything he's done over the past 40 plus years. And Rich, I'm so appreciative that you took time to sit down with us on the Voice of Impact to share not just your own personal story, but your work to the listeners. And I believe there's somebody that's listening today that must have gotten something, that must have picked up something, and that would definitely want to be able to reach out and learn more about what you're doing. Thank you so much for coming over, Rich.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I think you brought out the best in me.
Thank you. We are Ndoping and Co performance systems designers and strategy coaches, and we help leaders and organizations create what we call clarity, alignment, and a sustainable impact. This has been the Voice of Impact. We've been speaking to Rich today. Until next time, keep building, keep developing, and keep using your voice.
And it's very simple. Empower as many people as possible. Empower as many leaders as possible. Touch as many professionals as I can. Be able to make a difference.